There's some questions that came in during your presentation. So
Okay. Let me see if there's
it's in the Q&A section.
Yes. Allow me to read a couple of them, please.
Okay.
So, Dr. Surishri has asked that any better app which can substitute Grammarly. What is the bad side of this app?
Yeah, the bad side, I think, is that it will give advice about being too direct, and that's the one that gets people into trouble. It says always use active voice, and say you've got you're dealing with a problem with an important client or somebody who's in a higher position of power than you, and Grammarly tells you to say, we've got a problem here, or something like that, or be direct about it, where Grammarly will often tell you to do this. That's the simplest answer. It also, I have had this where it gives words that in some cases, these words, well, one word is significance, I would think of, and I'm just kind of improvising here a little bit. Significance has a very specific meaning in psychology, and Grammarly probably won't get that. Grammarly will get the general meaning of significance. So sometimes it'll tell you to change words that you're using that word correctly because you're using it in your field. And Grammarly will say, well, that's not the way it's used. And it's actually, that is the way it's used in the field. And I end up doing this all the time when I'm editing papers, dissertations, or submissions to journals. I will dump the word in Google Scholar, and I'll go and find that exact field and make sure they're using that word correctly in that field, because sometimes I don't know how they're using that word, but I know to go to Google Scholar, and before I tell somebody they're not using that correctly, because often they are, I've just never seen it used that way. And so those are the two. There are some other things about Grammarly, but it's very helpful sometimes with stuff, prepositions and other errors, but some of them are the same types of errors that Microsoft Word will catch too.
Okay.
Let's see.
Can we take one
yes.
more?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the similar lines. What are the better strategies to paraphrase the author's original write-ups?
Okay, well, I think looking at the original write-up, it's in sciences and in philosophy and things like that, you're often going to have to use that chunking strategy. The parts of the sentences, you're dealing with complex sentences, and so you're going to have to break them apart. But when I'm paraphrasing like a newspaper article or something like that, that kind of whole meaning, what are they saying here? Can I just put my own words, an opinion piece in the newspaper? So quickly, if you can put it in your own words, using that whole language approach is probably the best. But you're not going to be able to do that in higher level academic writing. You're probably going to have to chunk it out.
Okay. One more question from the Q&A section. I think it's Professor Sarjay Rao. If you use someone's stuff unknowingly, how it can come under plagiarism? How can we free from any type of plagiarism?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good question. And, as I say, George Harrison would have had some words about that because he lost a few $1 million on that one. But the question is, when I see people doing something, it's often mistakes that they're making they are trying to write directly from what they're looking at, rather than I close the book or I close whatever I'm doing, and then I go back and double check that I've got the meaning correctly. And I say it's better to oversight than undercite. Like sometimes I cite things that I'm not sure I really need to cite. Now, I don't cite Paris is in France, of course, or something like that. But if you're worried about it, like one thing I've done is I've been writing some things that I think I know this, it's a general idea in my field, but I'll look back and I'll see if other people are citing it and who came up with it first. And if it looks like it's kind of an original idea, I'll just go ahead and cite it. Even though, I've used it and people have talked about it a lot before.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. I think it's time, but let me put forward one last question asked by Sankalp. Do you think Grammarly weakens an individual's creativity?
It's depending how you're using it. I would say if you're using it as I'm writing and then I'm rewriting everything according to Grammarly, and I have Grammarly hanging over my head and I'm worried about what Grammarly is going to say, then yes. If you're just writing and you're running it through Grammarly and you're saying, you're asking yourself constantly, is their advice good? Then no, and it's probably good advice. I run through this checkers and I say, is their advice good? And in some types of writing, you can use fiction, for example, run on sentences or sentence fragments. And I see sentence fragments even used sometimes to make emphatic points in papers. And if you are a good enough writer to do that, you're probably a good enough writer to judge whether Grammarly is catching the fact that you had a typo or Grammarly is giving you bad advice. I'm not saying go out of sentence fragment. I'm saying it's something, people do things for emphasis, and knowing if you use Grammarly and you're just like, how do I write to Grammarly? Yes, it definitely does. If you're using it and you're saying, is Grammarly giving me good advice or do I want to write this way? Then, it's a tool.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, both of you, for a wonderful session.
Thank you.
The session was indeed insightful and informative. I also thank all the participants for such inquisitive questions. I also thank the speakers for setting the benchmark of the opening session today. Thank you all.